How you doing, guys? This is another episode of King James. This is part two of After God's Heart. So I'm gonna have to give you a little backstory to start this one. And so we're gonna start with King David. We talked last time about he's leaving his kingdom because Absalom's come to take over. He's going up on the mountain weeping, and then he goes barefoot to accept the full blunt of the punishment. That's how David's heart is toward God. So David, if you don't know, is the David who slew Goliath. So when David slew Goliath, he came back, and King Saul brought him back to his palace with him. And King Saul had a son named Jonathan. Jonathan loved David like his own soul, the Bible says. So, in order for David to end up getting the throne, Saul and Jonathan die. And Jonathan was always the best friend to David. And so, when David took the throne, he sends his men. He says, listen, is there anybody left of the house of Saul and Jonathan that we may take care of them and bless them, So they go searching out, and they say, yeah, we found this guy, Mephibosheth. He's Jonathan's son, and he's still alive, but he's lame. It means he's crippled. So David says, bring him to the palace. He brings him up there, and he says, listen, I'm going to take care of you. Everything that was Saul's is yours. Now, this guy can't walk. He can't do nothing for himself. He says, listen, everything that was King Saul's, listen, if you were king, you can imagine you owned a lot. So King Saul owned a lot. Jonathan owned a lot. Everything that was theirs, he gives to Jonathan's son. And so, and he tells him, he says, from now on at supper time, you eat at my table. Everything that your father owned and your grandfather owned is yours. It's vineyards, it's gardens, it's all this stuff. And he tells him his family and gives him some men, they take care of it. All you got to do is sit here and reap the benefit of it, and you eat at the table with me. You're in charge of all of it. So now we pick the story back up, and David has left the kingdom. He took his shoes off. He's headed up the mountain. And so, sorry guys, I'm trying to flip back. I forgot to turn the page where I started this. All right. So this is we're still in chapter 15 of 2 Samuel. And it says 15:32. And it came to pass that when David was come to the top of the mount where he worshipped God, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat rent and earth upon his head. Now, I'm skipping down to the next chapter, but I wanted to pick up the story where he's going up the mountain with his shoes off, and he's like, he takes his shoes off because he wants to take the full blunt. Then where he's on his way to is on a place to worship God. And I wish the Bible told more about his worshiping God, so that we could look further into what's going on. So that we can look further into how he's worshiping God. What is he doing? Is he making sacrifices? Is he, what is he doing? Well, I can pretty much think that because he did give us Psalms, and a lot of the Psalms is written by David. So we can kind of peer into the Psalms and look back over at this and say that he's probably up there saying, your judgment is righteous. Thank you for sending it to me that I may not perish in the end. that I can go through whatever punishment I got. I'll deal with it here. Thank you, God. I praise your name, God, that you have found me worthy to punish while I'm on earth. Does that make sense? So that when I die, I go with you. And the Bible doesn't state that. And if you was to read Psalms, it probably gives you a little better idea, because I'm sure David wrote the Psalms during that time. But that's where we're going to pick the story up at. As he went up the hill, he took the full blunt of his punishment, and he's like, God, I love you, I respect you, I trust you. Whatever punishment you have, I'm here to accept it. And then so let's skip over to chapter 16, verse 1. And when David was a little past the top of the hill, behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him. Now, like I just told you, Mephibosheth is the guy that David brought into the kingdom and said, look, everything that's your father's and your grandfather's is yours. And he blessed him. Now, I can look at the story and say that God must have put it on David's heart to do that. David loved Jonathan. Jonathan loved David. They were besties. They were best friends, you know. They were roll dogs. But for a man to think of that, with everything that's going on, how are you going to stop and think there's somebody left in Jonathan's house and I'd like to honor him? So God put that in his heart. And so a servant of this Mephibosheth met King David with a couple of asses saddled, and upon them 200 loaves of bread, and 100 bunches of raisins, and 100 of summer fruits, and a bottle of wine. And so he's like, what is this? He said, well, the donkeys is for you and your house to ride on. Now, I've done some math, and I try to figure it, and I can't figure it out exactly. And there's probably people way smarter than me that can. But he started out with like 600 men. He sent some back. He sent some back. So I would say these 200 loaves of bread and the 100 bunches of raisins and the 100 summer fruits isn't for him and a couple of people. He's got a few hundreds with him. You know, so that's, I would say that if he hadn't took care of Mephibosheth, that he would be in the wilderness right now, and he would not make it back to the kingdom. He'd die, because he don't have all these people that are with him. It's going to be hard to feed. All these people with him is going to be hard to take care of. And so because God put it on his heart to bring Mephibosheth back to the kingdom and to bless him, now Mephibosheth says, here's my chance to give David back. Because in Mephibosheth's eyes, he was crippled, living with some maidservant that's just barely keeping him alive. And nobody probably respects him. He's not nobody important. He's a bum. If you can't walk, you can't work. If you can't work, you can't make money, and ain't nobody around there trying to take care of you. But Mephibosheth, he was amazed that David brought him to the kingdom and said, look, everything that was your father's the king, your grandfather's the king, and your father's, my best friend, is now yours. All of it's in your control. You do with it what you want. And so Mephibosheth knows David's been run out of the kingdom. He's fleeing. Listen, here's him, 200 loaves of bread, 100 bunches of raisins, 100 summer fruits, a bottle of wine. Bring this stuff to him that he can survive and make it back to the kingdom. Because out there, it ain't like today. It ain't like, you know, we get ran out of the kingdom, we're going to stop at the grocery store on the way down the road and grab some food. No, there is no grocery stores. There is no food. There's only what you bring with you. And if you leave in haste, if you're being run out of the kingdom to keep from killing your son or your son killing you, you're not going to have a lot of provisions. You're going to have enough to get by for a day or two, maybe, you know. And then you could literally live for 4, 5, 6, 7 days with no food and water, but you ain't going to have energy to fight if they come out there to kill you. You pretty much done for. So God puts it on Mephibosheth's heart to send this stuff out there to him. And so then I'm going to pick the story back up. So now David he's not barefooted walking no more. Now he's on a camel. I mean, not a camel, but a donkey. And his men are fed. He gets word of what's going on in the house. Now listen, we're going to pick up the story back at chapter 16, verse 5. And there's a point I want to make with this while we're going here. Okay. He says, and when King David came to Bahurim, behold, thence came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shemaiah, the son of Gera. He came forth and cursed still as he came. And he cast stones at David and at all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left hand. So this guy comes out there and starts casting rocks at David and his people. These hundreds of soldiers or whatnot, he's out there throwing rocks at them. And then right here in verse 7, and thus said Shemaiah when he cursed, come out, thou bloody man, and thou man of Belial. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom unto the hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. So he's cursing him. He's saying, look, you bloody man, get out of my family's kingdom. God's punishing you for what you did wrong. And that hits home with David, because David knows he done wrong. It hits home with David. So how's David different than the rest of us? So then said Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, unto the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. So one of David's mighty men that runs around with him said, look here, king, let me just go away and kill this man. How dare he cuss the king like this? I would say in this day and time, if you came out there with a vengeance to kill the king and you was like, I challenge you, King David, let's fight to the death. King David ain't finna get off his horse and fight you, man. You're a peasant. Listen, he ain't even finna get off the horse, man. He's probably not even gonna look in your direction. One of his men is gonna jump off and slice you in half. Because he's the king, man. You can't just, there ain't nothing you got going on that's gonna make the king so angry that he would lose his composure, jump off his horse, and fist fight with you. You know, it's not how it works. But King David ain't like me and you. King David's like this. King David answers these guys after he says, let me go over and kill him. So David knows that he don't even have to go over and deal with this guy that's cussing at him, throwing rocks at him. And David's like, and the king said, what have I to do with you, ye sons of your Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord hath said unto him, curse David. Who shall then say, wherefore hast thou done so? He's saying, what has it got to do with you? This man's cussing me. He wouldn't be out here cussing me unless God put it in his heart. Go cuss David. So who are we to stop somebody who's under the will of God? Now that's a hard one to say. Listen, that's a hard one to say, brother. That means that a person would have to take a hard look at what they got going on. You know, when I was caught up in my addiction, I knew this guy. I worked him. He was on drugs. We was working real late one night. We came home and I dropped him off and he was asleep. He was asleep in the car. And so I woke the man up and at his house. I'm at his house trying to drop him off. I woke him up and he starts freaking out. And he goes over there and goes in the house and looks around and his wife ain't there. So he says, he goes to the house scrummaging. He's like, hold on, man, hold on. I might not stay here. So he comes back out. He's like, hey, can I use your phone a minute? Sure, man. I hand him the phone. He uses my phone. He calls her. He's cussing, raising Cain with her. And then he gets off the phone with her, and he goes to busting her stuff up. Now, I know him, and this is not his house. This is her house. And he's just, that's where he's staying at. But he's busting her stuff up. So I go to the window. I'm like, hey, bro, look, I ain't going to jail with you, homeboy. Bring me my phone now. Long story short, he comes out there and ends up hitting me in the face. And we scuffle around the yard for a little bit. And he had a bat. We scuffle around a little bit. I get back to the house. I'm sitting there at the house, and I'm angry. Very angry. I am so angry. I can't even, I know me, and I know him. He's worked with me, so he knows me, and we both know I'd demolish him. You know what I mean? If he didn't have that bat, if I could just lay one punch on this boy, right down the face. Listen, I ain't saying I'm no bad boy. I'm saying that if I could just land one, there ain't gonna be no fight left. Listen, I promise you, I'm a scared person. If I'm scared you finna hurt me, and if I could just get you to maneuver where I could just land one, that's all I need. If I'm not gonna knock you out with that one, I'm at least throw you so out of balance that I'm finna take you to the ground and start pounding you in. That's how I'm thinking the situation. But I'm sitting at the house angry, mad, just wanting to, man, because before it got over with, we're out there dancing around. I'm trying to get one on him. The neighbor screams, I'm calling the police. He tears out running. And so now, if somebody ever hits you and you don't have the opportunity to hit them back, you get so angry. So angry. So I'm sitting at the house and I'm that angry. And what went through my head is, this man didn't punch you in the face, Jeff. God did. And I said, well, that don't make no sense. And then I thought about what I got going on in my life and all the things that I'm taking advantage of and not doing right. Then all my anger went away. I said, you're right. There ain't no way that I can say, and this is before I was saved, but I've always been listening for the last 10 years. I've been listening to Christian music and preaching on radio. And so I know this. I knew that not a sparrow falls without God say so. So I'd say not a punch is swung without God say so. And so I rationalized it as what I was doing was wrong and upsetting him. And so he thought maybe I need a punch in the face. And so that's how I got it. And so then David goes on to say, and David said unto Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my son, which came forth of my bowels, seeketh my life. How much more now may this Benjamite do it? David said to Abishai, that's the one that's wanting to kill his friend, kill the guy that's cussing him, and to all his servants, behold, my son, which came forth of my bowels, seeketh my life. My own son is trying to kill me. You know what I mean? Absalom is trying to take over my kingdom. He's trying to hunt me down and kill me. How much more now may this Benjamite do it? You know what I mean? Let him alone and let him curse, for the Lord hath bidden him. It may be that the Lord will look on mine affliction, and that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day. He's saying, listen, my own son's trying to kill me. This is the punishment I deserve for what I done with Bathsheba and Uriah. If this man's out here cursing me, that's a part of God's will. That's divine. I can't argue with that. I'm going to have to let that be. I'm going to have to let him cuss me, and maybe God will look down on me and see that I'm taking it like a let me explain it this way. Say you come in the house. I told a friend of mine the other day in Kentucky that perfect to a parent is different than perfect. Okay, so let me give you a scenario. So I come in the house and the lamp's broke. So I'm looking for the kids. I find them. I'm like, hey, who did this? And one I'm saying one did it, one I'm saying the other did it. I'm now more angry than I was when I saw that the lamp was broken. Now I'm going to have to figure out which one did it. And when I do, I'm going to be so angry, I might just whoop both of them. You know what I mean? Now let's draw the scenario out where I walk in the house and I see a lamp broken, and right beside it is one of my kids. Dad, I'm sorry. I broke the lamp. I was goofing. I know I shouldn't have been goofing, but I did it. And, whatever you see fit, I'm all right with it because I know I shouldn't have done it. I might not even punish that. I might not even punish him. I might be like, well, who can be mad? That's a perfect son. A perfect son does not mean you don't mess up. A perfect son is you're standing right beside what you done until Dad gets home and you're like, look, here's what I did. And I know I wasn't supposed to do this. So David's trying to be after God's own heart. How? Because he's standing behind. I did wrong. I'm not mad that part of God's punishment for me is let this man cuss me out. Leave that man alone, dude. Maybe God will look down here and see that I'm taking this whooping and he's not having to chase me down to give it to me. And reward me for that. And have mercy on me because I am walking out the punishment with the right heart. If you put your child in a corner and he's over stomping and huffing, I'm gonna leave him in there longer. Listen, you ain't gonna catch that attitude with me, boy. Let him help. All right, you gonna be that way? Sure. I'm gonna leave you in there for another hour. And then if you huff and puff or stomp again, another hour. Let's keep going with it, right? Well, what if he goes over, stands perfect, and don't make a sound? That's what obedient children do. So that's what David's doing. David is, God told me to get in the corner. God told me to lead my kingdom. God decided this man needs to be cussing me to add on to my punishment. I'm okay with that. Listen, God controls everything. God controlled Pharaoh. It says God hardened his heart. Let him harden his heart so that the people of Israel will know I set them free. I decide when they go. And so that he can be glorified and shown all the plagues that he put on Egypt. So when it's hard when something goes wrong. But the peace comes in being a child of God and saying to yourself, I will endure this. My wife's car got stolen. And I told her, I said, a person has to look at it this way. Has to. They have to say one or two or maybe three things that could be going on, because you got to know that God's in charge. So you have to say, A, God is getting my attention from something. B, maybe this is for my better because the car's got problems and I'm like, maybe this is God's way of getting you something new. But you got to know that it's God's control. There's not a sparrow touch the ground without God say so. God is in control of everything. Even Satan come up to him. Hey, look, I've been running around trying to see who I can destroy. What does God say? He says, have you considered my servant Job? Sometimes we go through things as a test. Sometimes we go through things as when we come out the other side, it doesn't make sense, but we're going to be stronger. Sometimes God lets us go through troubles so that we'll seek out his face, because that's what mankind do. A lot of times you'll hear these stories where somebody was on the deathbed and then they have an encounter with God, and then they're changed throughout the rest of their life. Sometimes that's what God has to do to get your attention. Sometimes you can hear other people's stories, and that'll get your attention. But everything, getting punched in the face, getting your car stolen, none of that happens without God's say so. If you think that it's just a freak accident, then you think God don't really have control of this thing. My littlest boy, Jonah, he's afraid of heights, and if I go to pick him up, he don't like it. He'll scream. He'll be like, no, and he'll grab a hold of me. He don't want me picked up. But when God goes to pick us up, there shouldn't be a worry that he's going to accidentally drop you. You got to find it you got to understand it as this is how this is. God doesn't make mistakes. Nothing happens that he's got to have an emergency meeting over. There's nothing going on. He's like, I don't know how that happened. How did that get by me? And then he's got to gather up all the angels and have this emergency. That doesn't happen. I tell people during my addiction, every time I done a shot, every time I done anything he didn't agree with, I got to think of it one way and one way only. He looked at his clock and said, right on schedule. This is the path I've chosen for Jeff to get him to where he will be preaching my word one day. I have to see it that way because I now have made it through all the tough times. I now have made it through all the troubles I thought was impossible to get out of. But now that I'm standing here, I can say 100% it's a part of God's plan. Had to been a part of God's plan. Anyway, so this is part 2. And some more cool stuff happens. So I'll end up making another part or 2. But this is after God's heart. I hope you guys are after God's heart. And I hope maybe this helps you some way. In Jesus' name I pray. Thank you guys.